Good afternoon from sunny UK, from Buckinghamshire and Herefordshire.
Hello.
Lovely part of the world. Hello. I'm delighted for this 24th Author Spotlight to have Marilyn Pemberton with me to talk all about her and her writing, which as writers we're just delighted. We are delighted to do. It's unfair to say we don't like talking about us and our writing, but we're just not used to it, and we should do it more often and have opportunities like this to natter away as we can. Anyway, so we shall start at the very beginning. I don't know how far back we go with you and your writing, Marilyn. Can you remember when you started either unserious at school or serious writing? And can you remember an early thing you wrote?
So if you're talking about fiction or non-fiction,
Anything.
right? So
Yeah,
obviously I did O-level English language, and then I went on to the sciences. So English O-level was my last bit of imaginative writing, if you like, because after my A-levels, I went straight into work with computers, where your imagination is you don't use your imagination at all. So writing reports, writing computer code. I didn't ever go to university. Well, I didn't go to university when I was sort of 18, 19. But when I was 40, I thought, I wonder if I could have got a degree. So I started doing a part-time degree course for a mature student at Warwick University. So I was still working. But again, that's all essays. It's all non-fiction, if you like. But that's sort of writing those. I did a BA, I did an MA, I did a PhD, so it took many, many years. So I was writing about other people's imagination rather than my own. When I finished my PhD, I just got so used to writing and researching, I didn't want to stop really. And I like to think I'd discovered a Victorian writer. As part of my PhD, I did it on Victorian fairy tales, and there was a female writer, Mary de Morgan, wonderful name, who I actually became quite obsessed with, and I decided I'd write her biography. So that's the sort of the first thing really that I wrote voluntarily, if you like. She was a wonderful woman. So I wrote her biography, which has got lost in some black hole. It has been published, but in those, I can't remember when it was, 2008 possibly, something like that.
I got here, Cambridge Scholars Publishing 2012.
Oh, 2012, okay.
Yes.
I mean, I knew nothing. They published it, and I don't know how many I saw. I never got a penny for it. But again, I wrote that biography, and there was quite a lot of things I hadn't found out about her. So I thought I'll have a go at writing a fictional story about her. Well, as I said, I hadn't used my imagination, if you like, since I was 15 or 16. So I went to a writing class. It was meant to be just 6 weeks, on character, plot, and all that sort of thing. In fact, it lasted for 3 or 4 years. But whilst there, I told them that what I wanted to write. I wanted to write this novel, and I started writing it, and took quite a few years to get it to the stage where it is published. But that really was my first. It was a fictional book, I suppose, really. And yeah, I just loved writing, and I just loved the whole process that I've just carried on, really. So,
but I think whatever you've written beforehand, because you've been so prolific, whether it's non-fiction, computer tech, it still gives you. I was talking earlier on about discipline, that it's given. I was just with Sarah, that it gave her the discipline. Although she was writing technical work, it gave her the discipline. She had deadlines and college work, and even just a voluntary class, like an evening class. You've still got, you're going back on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, whatever it is, and you've got something you want to take with you. So it's
Although I've never had the discipline of deadlines, because I've never had a publisher. Well, I've had a publisher, but not one that gives deadlines, if you see what I mean. So but yes, and you're probably right, actually. Yeah, as I said, it's the whole process of writing that I just didn't want to give up. So that's why I went into writing fiction. So yeah.
So how did you get into was it a love at school of mythology and the history, and were you historical fan when you were younger?
No, not really. So when I did my MA, there's 4 modules in an MA, and one of them, and I did English literature. One of them was children's literature, as it happened, and it was in there that I sort of found out about some Victorian fairy tale writers. And they wrote some fabulous fairy tales, for adults, not for children. They were wonderful, and I just fell in love with them. And I think it was there that I actually first heard of Mary de Morgan.
Okay.
But yeah, no, this concept of retelling tales, especially by women, and how they challenge conventions. They did in the Victorian times, rather than the ones that we all know, the Grimm's tale, the Grimms and
Sure.
Christian Andersen, where they tend to condone the patriarchy rather than challenge it. I just got quite interested in it.
And do you find, how different do you find the fictional process where you can create your own world within a certain point, because you are basing it on a factual person?
Yeah. I must admit, I just didn't know if I could write fiction. That's why I went to the writing class. Well, no, I love it now, but I still do research because I write historical novels. So I do, not as much as I did obviously for a PhD, but I mean, I do research. I do like to feel that I'm writing historical fact, if you like, or as it should, as it was. I don't make everything, but
yeah, just expand on it.
Yes, and fill in the gaps. I do fill in the gaps. Yeah.
Did you plan much before? Because obviously you had a basis to then spring from.
Yes.
Did you plan it all the way through, or?
Yes, I'm a planner, definitely. Well, because I used to do project management, IT project management, which sounds really boring, and I suppose it probably was really, but definitely planning. I am definitely a planner, yes. So when I wrote the biography, obviously I had facts that I followed, and I did actually change 1 or 2 things, some dates, which I regret now, but I was quite new at it then. I didn't realise how upset people might get.
Right.
Yes,
but there'll always be somebody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But
even if you have the copyright statement at the beginning that says it's based on people, but it's not necessarily. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll never do that again. But yeah.
So how do you find the editing process when you've finished? Because obviously fiction is very different to non-fiction. With non-fiction, I suppose, because you're writing fact, there's not a lot then to go back and change. You're only just changing the style of maybe one word for another. Do you find when you're writing fiction that when you went back through it, can you remember how much you changed of it?
Well, okay, let's start with my debut novel, The Jewel Garden. That I sent that out to somebody called Ben Wildsmith, who I think you could call him a development editor rather than a whatever. I mean, there's lots of editors, isn't there? Yeah. So for, I can't remember how much, a couple of £100 or something, he did a character and a plot summary.
Okay.
And sort of fed back how he thought characters could be developed or how the plot didn't quite work. And for the Jewel Garden, he enjoyed it. He liked the characters, but I'd written it from a fictional point of view, who meets Mary de Morgan, who I was basically basing the story on. But I'd written it after Mary de Morgan had died, so it was all in flashback, if you like. Right. And he said, it's a good story, but you just don't feel engaged with Mary at all. She's just, you just don't feel engaged with her. So he said, write it, what's the word? Chronologically.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah,
chronologically. No, you're right, chronologically.
Yeah.
So basically it was a total rewrite, which it was absolutely the right thing to do. But since then, having learned that sort of side of it, I very much edit as I go along. So I do go back at the end and reread it, but I never change the plot or change anything fundamental, because I never finish a chapter or I never go on to the next chapter until I'm absolutely happy with the first one.
See, a
So
lot of people are horrified by that thought. They just want, but then they tend to be more pantsers. See, I'm
oh,
kind
no.
of, I started off as a pantser and I would just let it float. But then I found the more I wrote that I got stuck quicker. So I thought I'd got an idea of where it was going. But if I get stuck on something, I'll put more here. And then if I know a later point, I'll write the later point and then come back. But then I found it's actually easier to have 2 or 3 projects on the go, because if I get completely stuck on one of them, I can then move
Oh,
over
right.
to another
Yeah,
one
I'm not sure I
and
do.
come back.
Yeah,
You work on one thing at one time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, writing, yes,
Mm,
yes, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, as I've written more, I do plan. I mean, I always, I have this spreadsheet and I have not exactly chapter by chapter. I know exactly where I think it's going to go, but I must admit, now that I'm on the 4th in a series, I don't plan some. I know how I want it to end, but the characters, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the character, you didn't get.
They do. I know what you're going to
The
say.
characters wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't do that, because I mean, so, but I know the general direction, yeah. But as far as editing, I still send my books to this guy because he's just very good and he's always very positive, and I like that. But I don't. To be honest, I can't afford any other type of editor. The ones that go through and pick out the words and your typos and things. I do have a friend that reads. She's very good at spotting typos. She does it for free.
So have you self-published? Do you
No,
have a publisher ever
I do have
published
a.
for everybody?
He's a
Yes, because
one-man
they'll
band. Yeah,
yeah,
but
because they'll have their own editors and
no, he's a one-man. No, he doesn't.
oh, okay.
He's a one-man band. He
Right.
will
Okay.
basically put it, get it printed for you, put it on Amazon.
Right.
He does no
Right.
marketing, no publicity.
No.
And he said that right from the beginning, but I was so pleased to get somebody that wanted, that liked it. That
Yeah. Well, I think anybody who helps you, even if you're paying them, or they take a commission or a royalty,
yes, he does
then
yeah.
then I think it means it frees up time for, because really as writers all we want to do is write.
No, absolutely.
It's everything else that however enjoyable the marketing is, it's still, it's a lot to it. And it's just, you think once, because I did when I published my first book back in 2008, I thought that I put it up on Amazon and I used Smashwords as well at the time. And on Amazon, it just goes into a black hole, and then they email you a few hours later and say it's available. On Smashwords, you actually, I don't know if it's still the case, you have you are X in the 99th in the queue, and you can just sit there. You get a drink, get comfortable, and you sit there, and it chunters down until you're first in the queue, and then congratulations, it's published. And so that you then think, great, and it's then at the top of the home page for about 30 seconds if you're lucky, because then everybody else around the world who's been in the queue behind you is then top of the page, and so on it goes. And so marketing is a big, if you're self-published or you're with a small press, it's part of the demand of
Nightmare, to be honest.
getting people. It's hard work. Yes, I in chatting with Sarah, I called it torturous. She loves it, but again, we agreed it takes time out. That
yeah,
I
probably, you'll probably consider I'm no good at it. I probably don't do enough, but yeah,
it's knowing what you're doing for the best, really.
yeah.
We were talking before camera that I post on Facebook every hour. But if you get no likes and no comments, you can't think, is anybody seeing it? But you just have to hope that if enough people see the same thing half a dozen times or so, that they will start noticing, oh yes, I saw that before. It's like adverts. A good advert, you see it once and you know what it's for. A semi-good advert, you see it half a dozen times and then remember what it's for. So do you have what input do you have on the covers for your
right, so
book?
a lot of input actually.
Okay.
So for my first one called The Jewel Garden, back then I didn't really know much about writing or publishing or anything, so I got a friend who's quite a good artist to paint something. The Jewel Garden. I won't go into much detail, but it occurs in a dream, if you like. And I just said, read this passage, which is about the description of this place, and see what comes out. And I think what she did was fabulous. So I used her for that, because the publisher guy, this guy, Mike Linnane is his name.
Oh yes, I know Mike.
You know
Yeah,
Mike.
we met at Harrogate a few times.
Yes, yeah, he's very much into crime, isn't he? Yes.
Yes, isn't he?
So he's
Yes.
my publisher.
Okay. Yeah, no, he's a nice guy.
So I mean, he said basically, you know, do your own cover. He wasn't. He didn't pressurize me. Then I got published for my second book. I'll call it a hybrid publisher. Some might call it vanity, but it is hybrid. But they provided a cover design. Beautiful, it was beautiful. But I didn't go back to them. I've gone back to Mike for all the others. And I just found a cover designer that I liked, that had done one that, in fact, you probably know him, Simon Wally.
Oh yes, I know. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I know. Yes,
Yeah,
that was not the name I was expecting you to say.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yes,
Yes. So
the dog training books, and so
yeah,
yes,
but she did. He's
yeah.
done a murder books, and she did the cover, and I
Okay.
love them. And I said, oh, you know, would you consider doing mine? So I give her the ideas, and yeah, she's come up with some lovely covers.
Right.
Yeah, she's done all of them.
Okay, brilliant. So we've yes, we'll skirt over marketing again.
Oh, yeah.
So we know what. Yes, it's trouble is there are a lot of. I was saying this again to Sarah just now, that there are so many of us fish in the book buying pond that I think a lot of it's word of mouth. Somebody reads a book they like and they go on their social media and somebody else picks it up, and it's how, as I said in an earlier, I didn't actually say the name, but I said it underneath 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh right, okay.
That was how it got to be such a big bestseller, was just word of mouth. But in the meantime, we have to yes, just hope that us jumping up in the air saying hello, we're here, catches the right person every now and then.
I'm still not convinced that my readership, not that it's very big at all, but are the sort that go on Facebook, particularly. Right. I think I'm more for just because they're historical novels and they're sort of literary rather than body busters. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. I mean, I am on a few groups, and you know, I do post every now and then, but I'm just not convinced anybody has ever bought a book based on that.
Right.
So yeah, I go to craft fairs or book fairs, and I don't know. Yeah.
See, that's lovely because you get to meet the reader, your potential readers, and there's nothing quite like having somebody give you hard cash for your creation, and then saying, I said this more than once before, so apologies viewers if you've seen this in another video, but I'm pointing up there because it's up there somewhere. My first writer's block workbook, was my first book I ever sold, and that was at just done an hour's creative writing session, and then sold some books afterwards. And a young lady came up to me and said, well, it was probably a similar age because this is a few years ago, and she said, would you sign my book? And I was so thrilled.
Yeah.
Yes, I will.
I know.
And it's still like that never goes away.
No.
Even if it's your 100th. I don't know how many I've sold at events because I do WI talks, but yeah, there's nothing quite like getting the book in your hands in the first place when it comes from your publisher or from Amazon, and then meeting somebody in real life who actually wants to pay for something you've written.
Yeah,
it is. So so you've finished your fourth book?
No, I'm writing my
fourth book. Okay.
I can see the end at the light of the tunnel.
Okay. And are there going to be more after this in this
There'll be
series?
more of something.
Okay.
Probably. It was going to be a trilogy, and it was. It was planned it as a trilogy, but when I got to the end of the trilogy, I quite like leaving, open ends. I'm not a great believer in tying all the loose ends up, but there were a bit too many. I thought,
Right.
no, it's not a book, and I want to know what happens, so I know it. And probably, yes, there's probably a fifth, but who knows? Who knows?
Do you have other ideas completely different? Do you think you might change? I mean, you're obviously a history fan. I was going to
Yes,
say, would
like.
you change genre or era or anything
Well,
else that's bubbling around in your brain?
I when I was writing the biography and the Jewel Garden, which was based on Mary de Morgan, there was another woman that sort of was just on the periphery, who English, who was in Cairo, and she trained native women, Arabs, to be midwives, and I just think that's fascinating and so interesting. I've always, and she's another one with a fabulous name, which I can't actually remember now, but it is a fabulous name. And I've just got this yearning to tell her story, or maybe tell the story from one of the girls' points of view. Yeah. So that's in the back of my mind.
Right. So does she appear in any of your books so far?
Only by name, as
Right. See, I love that. I love. I read one of Katie Ford's books. I think it's called Love Letters, and it was based in about a woman who is made the bookshop she works in closes, and she's involved in a literary festival. She used to help set up, or it's set up, and she helps run it, a literary festival. And because she's been in the book industry, in publishing industry, she's then tasked to go to Ireland to get a reclusive author to speak and everybody says she's never going to do it, and she's quite meek and mild before she goes, but she plucks up the courage of getting this chap who comes back to England. He's in Ireland, comes back to England and appears at this festival, and you kind of know that, plot spoiling, kind of know that they might get it together. Anyway, she has a sidekick called Monica, her best friend, who's really feisty, and I love that. And Katie Ford was one of the judges one year for a writing group short story competition that we ran, and so I got to speak to her and said, would she do anything with Monica, because she was such a fun character, and I don't think she ever has, and but I just think it's lovely being able to just drip someone in, and then they appear as something, even if it's totally disconnected with the original series, of giving her life.
Yes. Well, the other thing I'm thinking about is in between. So I actually got a literary agent. I was absolutely thrilled, who took on the first in the series, A Teller of Tales. And then I gave her the second one, and she never ever found me a publisher. But I kept with her up to a certain point. But she said, when I was just about to start my third one, she said, stop what you're writing, write something a little bit more modern. It doesn't have to be contemporary, but a little bit more modern. Maybe World War II, mystery. That's what publishers are looking for.
Yeah.
So I took the challenge, and I actually did write an adventure story set in Egypt in the 1930s, and I actually enjoyed it. And again, she couldn't find a publisher. So in fact, I'm not with her anymore. I just give them straight to Mike now. But there is in my thought, if I could just work it out, there is a plot sort of hanging loosely from the Egyptian one that I could possibly tie up with the series.
Yes.
Putting the time, because I'd quite like the characters, the female characters I wrote about in the Egyptian one called Under the Eye. I love them. They were great fun. And there is a way I could join the two together. But yeah, I don't know.
Because you also had a, I'm going to read it out from my notes here, Enchanted Ideologies, a collection of rediscovered 19th century English moral fairy tales.
Yes.
Which is no mean feat to, and you were asked to do that.
No, actually, yes, I'd almost forgotten that. So that was when I was still doing my PhD, I used to go to conferences, and this one was in Malibu, which sounds very exciting.
Wow.
I was
Nice.
working, so I
Okay.
could afford to go. And I just gave this talk on whatever it was. Not Enid Blyton, the other one, Edith Nesbit, I think it was. And this guy came up to me, elderly type guy, and he said he used to be a professor, and he said, I'm going into publishing, and I want to publish things that I like, and I think what you've been talking about, would you like to do an anthology of fairy tales, Victorian fairy tales that aren't well known, and write a bit of an introduction to it, so like academic type book. I said, yeah, I'd love to.
Yes.
So I waited to finish my PhD, and then I did this. So it wasn't a matter of just going on the internet, because of course if they were on the internet they were relatively well known. So it was trawling around libraries and just looking. I mean, it's not the best book ever, and I'm sure if I did it now I could do it a lot better. But yeah, but he paid me $1,000, which is the most I've ever got for anything. Up front, just a one-off.
Yes.
And I think he's probably dead now, and goodness knows whatever happened to it. But it was an interesting case.
It sounds like you enjoy researching.
Yes, I do.
And certainly for that.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and I mean, I did a lot of research for Mary de Morgan. As it happens, coincidentally or fortuitously, her father was a very well-known mathematician. So in the Senate Library in London, there is a whole archive of Augustus de Morgan, who was her father. But there were also some boxes of his wife, Sophia, who was a great reformer and a spiritualist. So there was stuff about her. And there were also a few boxes about Mary de Morgan. So there was sort of like some of her typewritten stories and just also, it was just absolutely fabulous to go there and just look through. It was so exciting. Yeah.
I always go to the British, whenever I'm in London, I always make sure I go past at least the British Library, if not in there. And they often have, I think the last time I went, they had an Agatha Christie crime exhibition, which was fun.
Yeah. So yeah.
So what do you do when you're not writing? You obviously read a lot.
I do read a lot, actually. Well, I live alone, so I have the garden to do.
Okay.
I have 2 dogs who I absolutely adore. I've only moved to Herefordshire 3 years ago, and one of the things I did to sort of get involved in the community was go on the village hall committee. So I'm now the treasurer and the chair, and I do the book, and that takes up an awful lot of time.
I bet.
So actually I find very little time to write.
Right. Could we see I can't remember, you did tell me before we aired, you don't have to mention the name of it, but could we see a village literary festival at some time if you're on the committee?
No, it's not really. No, footfall. No. I mean, we do have events, but no, I don't think so.
That's a lot of work anyway.
Yeah.
To host one of those.
Yeah. Having gone to book fairs and sat, and hardly anybody ever turned up, although it's in the middle of a city or somewhere. We're not really on the way to or from.
Right. Which is a lovely place, the perfect place to be as a writer. You don't get disturbed then. You don't get tourists.
No.
Finding
I
your
did do a book signing in Bromyard, which is a town, not a very big town. And one person turned up. It's just so disheartening. Yeah, just so disheartening.
Not even the man and his dog.
No.
Just the person.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I've been there. There.
It's just yeah.
Yes, it's marketing again.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, Marilyn. Thank you so much. And we'll chat again. We'll hopefully meet up again in October, when we'll be digging into your first book of your choice and working our way through those to an episode per book, hopefully with a live audience, maybe just one man and the dog in the background. But yours have been very well behaved. You did mention that they were nearby. They've been very good. Yes, mine's been snuffling the door behind me, because he's normally in here when I'm in here. So he's getting used to it now. 24 author spotlights. He's getting used to being the wrong side of the door. Brilliant. Thank you again. and we'll see you in October.
Yeah,
Thank you,
you.
Marilyn.
Thank you. All right. Bye.